presented a very interesting talk on the visitor abduction case, and in July 2022 he addressed us on the subject of screen memories. Dave is the UK Deputy Representative for ICER, the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. Now, ICER is an organisation with representatives from 28 countries across 5 continents. It supports the view that UFOs are real, act with intelligence, and are likely to be non-human ET in origin. He's a regular columnist for UFO Truth magazine and has previously written for UFO Matrix and Paranormal and Outer Limits magazines. And over the last 15 years, he's investigated hundreds and hundreds of contact cases from around the world. And it's a part of the UFO enigma which continues to fascinate him to this day. Dave's also the designer of a fun tabletop UFO strategic card game, which is called UFO Wave. And that's available on Amazon if you're interested. Plug.
I bought a few along the
I thought you may have. Right, on to tonight. One of the aspects of contact which Dave finds particularly interesting is what is commonly referred to as missing time. This is where individuals end up with either partial or full memory loss after experiencing some sort of contact. Now, sometimes the memories can be retrieved at a later date, either naturally or by using specific methods. In tonight's lecture, Dave will look into the science behind missing time and discuss how it's actually possible to lose memories in the first place. He provides some incredible examples from the cases he's directly investigated and cover how these missing memories can be retrieved. He'll also discuss the various possibilities why missing time occurs so regularly with contact. So, please give me a warm, super welcome to Mr. Dave Hodrien.
Let's get things underway. Hopefully you can see the screen okay. I'm going to bring the lights down in. Yeah, I usually have a very, very bright projector, but unfortunately left it back in Birmingham this evening because it's the first month of Birmingham UFO Group, which I'm not going to be running this coming meeting because I'm away on holiday. So I have to wait and see how that goes. But here we go, on with the show. Dave. Hello. Could you put the mic up closer to the mic?
Yeah, sure thing, yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Good evening, Supon. It is truly wonderful to be back. I regularly mention Swansea UFO Network up in Birmingham. And the reason for that is that the active UFO groups within the UK are getting rarer and rarer by the year. And it's very, very important to say a fascinating subject. And it's very much in the limelight, especially across in the States, as many of you will be familiar with everything that's going on across there. Yeah, there's very few active UFO groups. There's plenty online that will gather resources, will investigate cases, but very few that have regular meetings. And it's a brilliant aspect, one of the things I love about Birmingham UFO Group. And it's great to see all you guys turning up down here in Swansea for it. Hands up if you were here for my last talk that I gave on screen memories. Okay, so yeah, this is a direct sequel in a way to that talk. It's looking at another aspect of the contact phenomena in great depth. As Steve mentioned, I've dealt with lots of contact cases since becoming an investigator in early 2008. And it's a window, I believe, into what's going on with the subject. Because once you go past the idea that they're here or whatever, you know, it's more about what they're up to, why are they here, why these things flying around our skies year after year, decade after decade. And I believe the contact phenomena gives us a view into that. The contact phenomena is very, very deep with all sorts of fascinating aspects to it. There's all sorts of similarities that go on across many, many cases from around the world, and it's one of the things that's convinced me that it's very much real rather than something that's just imagined in the brain or whatever. Tonight we're going to focus on missing time. Now, most of you, if not all of you, will have heard the phrase missing time before. It's one of the more commonly known aspects of contact. And even if you haven't really looked into the contact phenomena, the alien abduction phenomena, as it's sometimes called, in great depth, you may well have heard the phrase missing time, but this is going to give you more of an insight into that. And hopefully there'll be something here for you, even if you know quite a lot about contact, because it fascinates me. So first of all, we're going to a bit of a scientific background about memory and how missing time can even happen in the first place. Then we'll look at how missing time features in contact, what are the links with the contact phenomena and how that comes about. I'm then going to delve into some actual case studies I've investigated over the years, some really fascinating stuff, and we'll look at different types of missing time that can occur. There'll be a break halfway through the case studies for a bit, and then in the last section there'll be some possible reasons for why missing time might be taking place with the subject, and then some to wrap up some conclusions. So without further ado, let's get sciencey, shall we? So yeah, the scientific background. Well, first of all, what is memory? Well, a lot of people think they know what memory is. Yeah, you just think, oh, you're thinking about it in your brain, but what's the actual definition? The actual definition of memory is this: it's the process of acquiring, storing, retaining, and later retrieving information. So that's the Oxford Dictionary term. That's what we mean by memory. What is it in more depth? So the first studies looking into memory actually occurred right back in 1885. So it's been looked at for many, many years. And it was performed by a German psychologist, Hermann Ebbinghaus, which, unless you're an expert on memory, you've probably never heard of before. He conducted a lot of experiments that absolutely fascinated him, how the human brain actually worked and what was going on with the storage of memories. And he started to perform many experiments. Now, back then, it was a different time. There was none of the ethics that went on. These days, if a researcher did experiments on themselves, they would say that was biased, what they came out with, because they had certain views going in, and maybe would try to push those. But he did perform many of those experiments on himself, and also probably entirely illegally on other people. He widely believed, and as have many scientists since, the memories form via changes in what's known as brain neurons. That's a close-up of what brain neurons look like up close, and they're throughout our brains. Now, memories are actually created by the synapses that joins between these neurons in your brain, and strengthening those connections it creates new connections. So when you have a memory of something, they've actually observed new neurons actually coming into being where they weren't before, or kind of strengthening bonds between those neurons. And the stronger the connection, the more detailed and the more clearly the memories are remembered. So something, if you think back to something in your past that you're remembering really, really clearly, that's going to have more neurons going on, more activity going on in your brain with that. And this is the reason for why revision of repeated information, why that works if you revise for an examination or whatever. Hopefully not anytime soon. It's been a long time since I left university. Don't want to repeat that anytime soon, but yeah, that's why that works. So there are a number of different types of memory that go on. First of all, we've got sensory memory. This is very, very fast. It only lasts for several seconds, and it's essentially input into your brain from your senses. So looking at things, hearing sounds around you, and it allows you to interact with the world around you. But those, you don't realise it's going on, it's just all happening automatically all of the time. Next you've got what's known as short-term memories. These can last for between 20 to 30 seconds. If I look up at that up there on the wall, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice white wall over there. There we go, that's a short-term memory. In about 30 seconds I won't really be thinking about that anymore. It's no longer important to me, so it will disappear. Lastly, you've got long-term memories. These can last forever for the rest of your life, decades. So yeah, with the memory type, sensory memory, short-term memory, both of those are completely forgotten. As I said, they get scrubbed from your brain, because otherwise your brain would just be overloaded with information. But long-term memory goes to a different part of your brain and gets stored on a supposedly permanent basis. So let's have more of a look at long-term memories and what goes on. So these usually exist outside of our awareness, so you don't really realise that you've got all these long-term memories stored there. They're just there in your brain, you're not really thinking about them. Unless you want to think about them, they can be brought back into our conscious mind through what's known as recollection. And if I tell you to think about the last great holiday you went on, many of you are going to have a memory there. It's going to bring it back into your conscious mind. that memory retrieval process, as I'm sure many of you are aware, it's not perfect. And many things in life can happen to change how well those memories are retrieved. So there's many factors that influence how well this recollection process works inside the brain. Now, unfortunately, it's been proven that negative or painful memories are remembered longer, which is quite sad, really, if you think about it. You'd like to hope that your happy and positive memories last longer, but it's in actual fact the other way around, probably because they've just impacted you so much. So there's 3 different methods that go on with memory retrieval, and there's the 3 R's. So first of all, we've got recall. Let's go for this. What month and year did the Roswell crash take place? It's exam time, people. Hands up, anybody? 1947, yeah? There we go, July 1947. So that was you retrieving that information. You've read it somewhere, or maybe you looked into the case, or maybe you haven't and you've just accidentally heard it at some point and it's just in there through being involved and interested in the UFO subject. Next we've got what's known as recognition. So, who is the ranch farmer who first discovered pieces of the crashed object on his land? Was it Glenn Dennis, Matt Brazel, or Nick Pope? The answer is not, Stephen. It was Brazel indeed, yes. And that's... Now, you may well think that that's recall, and for some of you that might have been recall, but for others you might have forgotten that. But in seeing his name, seeing Matt Brazel down there, or me saying it out loud, that's brought it back. You're like, oh yeah, it's Brazel. Then you've got what's known as relearning. Jesse Marcel first publicly reported that the claims of a weather balloon had been a cover-up in 1978. Now, it's very likely, if you've watched some sort of documentaries in depth on Roswell, that you may well have come across that information before, but there's not many people who would be able to state that. But you just relearnt it by me telling you it now. So if a minute later I say it, it'll probably be like, oh, it's 1978, because you're remembering then, and it's gone into recall memory. So it's quite hard to bridge the gap sometimes between relearning and recognition. It seems to be quite similar in a way. But yeah, 3 recognise different types there. So there are recollection issues that can occur, as I said, recollection of a past experience. It's known as an autobiographical memory, because obviously autobiography is the story of your life, and that's essentially what your brain's doing. It's storing memories of your life. It's closely related to what's known as spatial memory. This is memories for locations and how locations are laid out, etc. Stops us running into walls. Also, if we've got our eyes open, obviously that'll help with that. And also, strangely, thoughts about future events. So they've found out that thinking about things that haven't yet happened actually goes into the same part of your brain as things that have already taken place, which is really intriguing. But sometimes the memories of these past events, they can be, unfortunately, completely forgotten. There's a picture on the right here of the missing jigsaw piece, and it's completely gone from the brain. What's known as missing time, really. There's all sorts of different ways that can occur. The memories can vanish from your brain. Let's have a look at some of them. So first of all, we've sadly got natural ageing happening to us all. More and more I think, my God, I'm 48 years old already, crazy. But yeah, as we get older, our memories start to deteriorate over time, and things from decades before you may not be able to remember at all anymore, but other memories might remain clear still. We've got medical issues. There's all sorts of different things that can occur, some of them here: a stroke, having a brain tumour, or an accidental head injury, so bang your head too hard, and the end result is lost memories, sometimes years and years and years of lost memories. Sadly, you've got the other side of that, mental illness, diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia. 2 of my grandparents both suffered from dementia in their later life, so I was seeing that firsthand, the effects of that and how that can change people. But yeah, again, entire parts of their life just completely gone, and then certain details might still remain. You've got medical intervention, one of which is electroconvulsive therapy. So this is a therapy where they essentially put electric current through your brain, usually to stop kind of certain mental illnesses. But in doing so, a side effect can be lost memories, because again it's damaging the brain, similar to sort of whacking your head, I suppose, but using that electricity. You've got certain medication, benzodiazepines and beta blockers. They're usually used to combat kind of anxiety or depression, and sometimes side effects from those can be missing time or missing memories. Recreational drug or alcohol consumption, usually in vast amounts. I enjoy beer here and there, but it's not like that. That usually won't cause missing memories, but alcoholics can find that they've got gaps in their memory as a result. Kind of creates permanent damage in the brain. Trauma, it's a very interesting one. So where people have very traumatic experiences that have affected them deeply, they can sometimes block those memories out and won't remember them later on. You've got something known as a dissociative state. An example here, highway hypnosis. Now, any of you who drive have probably experienced this without realising. This is where you're not really paying attention to the road and you're just kind of on autopilot. And 1 minute you're kind of driving, and the next minute you're pulling up on your drive, you're like, what happened? I don't remember it. But you remember the route, yeah? So your brain automatically followed the route home without you thinking about it. That's what's known as highway hypnosis. Happens quite a lot on sort of motorways, etc. Remember that for later on. Emotional states, or high emotional states, or a high degree of stress, anxiety, can also lead to missing memories. Usually not in extreme ways, but sort of minor loss of memory. It's also possible to force somebody to forget, at least temporarily, through hypnotic suggestion. In actual fact, it's probably possible to do that on a permanent basis, but most hypnotists wouldn't do such a thing. But of course, in some cases where somebody's trying to forget some extreme thing that's happened earlier in their life, they might specifically ask for that, and through hypnosis sessions, they can forget all about it like it never took place. So, here you're asking, that's all very interesting, but what's this got to do with UFOs, right? Well, let's have a look as we move into our next section. Missing time via contact. So, what can be gathered, and take my word on this because I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of contact cases, in a vast proportion of contact cases, missing memories is a repeated, noted aspect. There are very few cases where somebody who's had a contact experience remembers it in its entirety, right from the start in detail, right to the end. They will often have fragmented memories with noticeable gaps in them. Sometimes, so you're probably all very familiar by now with the abduction phenomena. Well, a lot of the time, a person can remember maybe seeing beings coming into their room or something like that. Then there'll be a gap in the memory, and all of a sudden, bang, they're in a different location. They're no longer in their room, they're another place, maybe aboard a craft, or they might interpret it as being aboard a craft. But there's a gap there with the travel, and this happens so regularly that it's been termed travel amnesia. So this is it's been widely observed that the travel is often forgotten. But I've dealt with lots of cases where it's not, and people have talked about in depth what happens with that. I'm not going to go into depth in that because I could write a lecture on just that in itself. But it may also sometimes be down to the individual losing consciousness. Right? So it's not that they've lost time, it's that they've been blacked out either intentionally or they just fall asleep and then some time passes, they come back round, they're elsewhere. They interpret it as missing time, but it's really that they haven't been conscious during that period, not that they've lost the memories. Now, there are a number of cases on record, and you're going to see some of those in this, where it occurs just with the UFO sighting, so it doesn't necessarily have to involve beings or what we consider as a contact case. So a contact case is where somebody interacts directly with beings or occupants of UFO, UAP, if you want to call it that. So it's not always involving contact, but you still get the missing time phenomena occurring, which is really intriguing. And in some cases, there are entire incidents that have been completely forgotten about. Now, of course, they're going to get them back at some point, otherwise they wouldn't have got in touch with me in the first place or any other researcher, because they wouldn't know, right? So there has to be a way that they can retrieve those memories. And there are a number of ways that missing time can be retrieved. Let's have a look at them. First of all, you've got natural recollection. So sometimes after a period of time after the experience, the memories, they start to slowly return to a person. They make them all at once, and all of a sudden they'll just remember it in its entirety. Again, it might be fragmented.
Sometimes they can get them as flashbacks, so they can be just making a cup of tea and all of a sudden, bang, they'll just have a few seconds, a kind of flash of something from their experience. They might remember the face of one of the beings they've met with, or maybe the other location they were in, or something like that. And it can come back in broad daylight with them fully awake and aware. Alternatively, it can come back when they're fully asleep, and it can be recounted as a vivid nightmare. They might associate it as that. They might not even think it's a real experience. They might think, oh, I've just had an extremely vivid nightmare. And it's only when they start looking into contact that they realise there's hundreds and hundreds of similar cases reporting the same thing that they conveniently remembered in their dream or nightmare. Now, sometimes it is hard to differentiate, especially when they're asleep, if they're having a vivid nightmare. Let's say they know all about UFO and contact subject. Let's say they've been going to lectures like this for years. So they know full well what's supposed to happen with an abduction, yeah? And then they have an experience, and a lot of it's missing, and then later on they have a nightmare where they seemingly remembering what happened to them. Very hard to say whether that is what happened to them or whether that's their brain essentially filling it in because of what they know about the subject. I've had a number of dreams throughout my life about UFOs and contact. You think I'd have dreams like that all the time. I don't, it's only every so often, but I interpret them as dreams. I don't believe that they are contact experiences for reasons I won't go into in depth at the moment. Okay, so next we're going to look at triggered recollection. So this is where the experiencer, they see or hear something that actively reminds them of their experience, yeah, and that triggers a recollection of it. It can include all sorts of things, locations, physical objects, particular sounds or smells. Some examples, there's a blue glowing LED light there. There's actually a case in Glasgow, an early case that I looked into, which had that very thing, where the lady had a fear of blue LED lights because it reminded her of something from her experience. There's porcelain dolls there, quite often will trigger people who've had contact experiences because it reminds them of the being. There's a needle there, might remind them of something that's happened to them during the experience. Doctors looking down on them, or a dentist chair, etc. All sorts of different things. And sometimes talking about what's consciously remembered, that can trigger additional recall. So when I'm working on a case and I start investigating it in depth, and I ask the person, you know, what do you remember? Take me through it. Other details that come back just from talking about it. It'll remind them, and their brain will start to remember other stuff that up until that moment they didn't realise they knew. Now, this triggered recollection was actually referenced in the famous movie of Travis Walton's abduction case, Fire in the Sky. Hands up if you've seen Fire in the Sky. Many of you, yeah. If you haven't seen Fire in the Sky, it's a little bit of a spoiler. It's one of, I'd say it's one of the best films that's ever been created on a contact experience. In this clip, Travis has just returned from his abduction experience.
What's the corner?
There we go, quite disturbing clip, especially if you've not seen the film before. But you can see there, that's when they picked up Travis, they took him to the hospital, and the doctors around him, the bright lights above him, were reminding him of what happened in his experience, and he was getting flashbacks to it. Later on, they hypnotised Travis, a lot more details came out, but a lot of it was remembered sort of consciously in due course, but he had missing time elements to it. So yeah, regressive hypnosis, that brings us on nicely, doesn't it? So this is a method of taking the individual back to their experience and trying to get them to remember further details of it under a hypnotic state. I work with a hypnotherapist in Birmingham who has assisted me on a number of contact cases. I've worked with several different hypnotherapists over the years, sat in on about sort of 15 to 20 different sessions over those years, and I'd say that sometimes it can certainly work. Now, sometimes these additional memories, they've been forgotten, they can be retrieved in that hypnotic state. Now, it's entirely possible to do this without, it's nothing to do with just contact, yeah? You could take somebody back to like 1980 and the hypnotherapist could say, you know, take me through what happened on the 1st of January 1980, yeah? And it's amazing how much detail is in there, is in your brain. So you wouldn't even think you'd be able to remember it, but people can remember like what they had for breakfast and all sorts of stuff. And people are, in that state will actually start talking like they're that age, so they might start talking like they're a child, or laughing like a child. It's really fascinating. Now, a lot of them, you know, there is problems with regressive hypnosis. I'm not going to shy away from them. I never shy away from stuff. It's a very controversial element of looking into the contact phenomena. It's been scientifically proven that you can implant false memories into somebody in a hypnotic state, and they will then associate them as things that have actually taken place. And it's also possible for individuals to fill in the gaps, just like with dreams, yeah? If the person knows a lot about contact, in the hypnotic state, their brain may fill in the gaps of what they think is missing, and then they'll start to interpret that as their experience. And that does make it difficult, and I'll always warn anybody going into hypnosis of those dangers with this, but I do believe that sometimes it can certainly work, and I've dealt with cases where most of the details are kind of consciously recollected already, and it's just kind of certain elements have been blacked out, and in that hypnotic state those elements have been broken past, and it's really, really fascinating when it does work. And some of the most famous cases on record have involved this regression, some of the most famous contact cases. So you probably recognise this, Whitley Strieber on the left, American author who had some absolutely fascinating in-depth contact experiences that also spread out into his family, so some was seeing things as well. In the middle, the infamous Betty and Barney Hill, one of the earliest kind of widely reported contact experiences. And on the right, that's Travis Watton, who we just seen in the film clip. Lovely man. So we're going to move on now to some case studies. So you're going to see some actual details from cases now that I've looked into. The cases are all documented on the Birmingham UFO Group website. Over 99% of the cases that I investigate in depth, the witnesses allowed me to write up those cases. Sometimes with a name blocked out or other personal details blocked out. We're going to start with this first section before I break partial missing time cases. So this is where the memories are fragmented. They've got some detail back, but not all of it. Let's go over this, the Thetford Bees. This is actually quite a recent case. It's only came to me a couple of years ago. But it's a historic case that occurred in the summer of 1991. And it involves a couple, sadly now split up. At the time they were married, Debbie and Tony. That's their real first names. Whenever I mention names in my lectures, it's because the witnesses allowed me to mention their name. Otherwise I'll tell you if it's a fake name. They live in Hitchin in Hertfordshire, or did back then in 1991. And one weekend they decided they're going to go to Great Yarmouth, just going to go out for a lovely holiday. So on the map here, that's Hitchin down there, and right up there's Great Yarmouth on the coast. Some of you may well have been there, lovely seaside town. So they just went out there. It was a really nice sunny day, and they decided to head for home quite late evening. They actually set off 10:15 at night. They start to make their way back home. Now, part of their route, they had to drive. They were heading westward along the Thetford Road, also known as the A1066. It kind of just heads westward until it reaches Thetford, and they were driving along part of that. And there's a stretch of it that passes through some forestry, some heavy woodland. It's known as Thetford Forest Park. We know that the incident took place on this stretch of road because the key witness, I spoke with Debbie,
She informed me that there were trees either side of the road, and it was the only heavily wooded part of their entire route, so we kind of followed it back on Street View and worked out that it must have happened on this stretch. There's an overhead map of it. You can see the road going through the wooded area around there, and that's what it looks like today at ground level, so you can see lots of trees either side of the road, relatively straight road. So Debbie's sitting in the passenger seat and her husband is driving, and all of a sudden she starts to feel very, very warm and quite sleepy. And this comes on sort of really suddenly out of the blue, and she's puzzled by, she's been feeling absolutely fine, hadn't been feeling sleepy or drowsy in any way before that on the journey, seemed absolutely normal. All of a sudden these two things start happening at the same time. This strange feeling of kind of stillness, of being inside a vacuum, she described it as. This is sometimes referred to as what's known as the Oz factor, which some of you have heard that term used, a term coined by Jenny Randall's ufologist. And it's basically high strangeness going on during the experience, and a lot of the time there's kind of interesting elements which we'll discuss in more depth in a bit. But she didn't mention it to her husband because she thought it's a bit weird. Maybe something medical. I just won't mention it to him, and they keep driving. And she thinks then she blacked out, yeah, involuntarily, yeah. So she passes out. Next thing she knows, her husband's screaming is there. He's shouting out, and at the same time he's slamming on the brakes of the car, and this brings her back awake in the passenger seat. For God's sake, what's going on? What the hell's going on here? She opens her eyes and looks at the front windscreen, and what she saw was this. Right, this is a sketch she's done of it. This is the front of their car, yeah. That's the front bonnet. That's the windscreen, yeah. That's her. That's her husband in the driver's seat. I know it's not the best drawing ever. These are the front wheels of the car, I guess. Front of the car. There's these beings, 4 of them in a row in the road, yeah. She said they kind of looked silvery. They were in these kind of dark, kind of cowled overalls, sort of bodysuits or something, and then their faces were exposed and were completely bald. They were facing sideways, so she couldn't see their eyes and mouths. There was a line of these 4 things in the road in front of them, facing sideways. So yeah, silver grey in colour, with this kind of strange shimmering effect around them, which she says, you know, all of a sudden it wasn't the headlights hitting them, it was more than that, it was coming off the beings themselves. She said that most of the beings were about 4 foot tall, so about the height of a child. That's the commonly reported sort of height for what's known as greys, the most commonly reported type of being in contact experiences. The one on the right here is a bit taller, it was actually 5 feet tall instead. Why, doesn't know, but yeah, bald heads. The heads were a bit bigger than human children, so sort of oversized heads. And these beings appear to only be a few feet in front of the car, yeah? And they're going to hit them. They're moving at some speed. They're not like crawling on the road. They're just driving home. So it looked like they were about to hit the beings, yeah? And they were going to slam into them and they'd be scattered all over the road. The craziest roadkill event ever, wouldn't it? But as the car reached them, the beings seemed to sort of dissipate and break apart, and they kind of passed through them. They sort of dissolved away. It didn't end there. Oh no. So a couple of seconds go by, and all of a sudden something else comes up into the headlights in front of them, yeah? And that's what she's drawn. It was some sort of energy barrier. It reminded her of an old cobbled stone wall that you see in the countryside, yeah? But it wasn't like a wall that was in the road. It was like some sort of energy form, but, you know, all made up out of these component parts. Really bizarre. And as they reach that, again, it dissolves, exactly like the beings did, dissolves away, and they keep driving. Then the beings reappear in front of the car. I know this is surreal. And they keep driving along, and she thinks that a couple of minutes went by where they were driving forwards and the beings were essentially floating, keeping their distance ahead of them. So they're looking there for a couple of minutes, staring at these things. It went on for up to 2 minutes, she believes, although time's gone out the window here with this one. It's all over the place, right? So it went on for what she believes for up to 2 minutes with these beings in front of her. After 2 minutes, the one on the right slowly turns its head, with them still driving, and looks straight at them. And she said that its eyes were like blackened holes of a skull. That's what she described them as at the time, because when she originally had this experience, she did not associate it with contact. What she associated it was ghosts. There's always 4 ghostly apparitions, and it was only in later years she started looking into contact, saw pictures of greys, etc. She's like, yeah, those are its eyes. They weren't holes, they were black eyes.
and it fitted, the description fitted with greys, but she originally associated with spectres. So yeah, this one on the right turns and he looks at them, bang, there's another period of blacks out again, yeah? Time vanishes, another period of missing time. Comes round again. Car's no longer on the road. Now the car's driving down what looks like a muddy covered track off the edge of the road through, there was kind of banks either side, or muddy banks. So they'd obviously come off the main road. We're driving down some sort of side track, a dirt track. Now we did look for this in the whole area of the park, but we couldn't find it. But don't forget, decades has gone on since the incident took place, so they might have filled that road in now. We don't know. It could have been there back in 1991. Her husband's, he's seeing all this as well. He's saying, "Oh my God, what's happening here?" So he's next to her, still driving, again experiencing the same periods of missing time as she is, not knowing what on earth's happening. Then there's another extended period of missing time, so she has a few seconds of that, of being off the road, going down this side path, and then the next memory, both of them are back home. And it's now the early hours of the morning, she reckons about 2 AM, they're sitting round the table with cups of coffee in front of them, her husband's there next to her, and she doesn't know how she got there, how they got back to the house or anything. All she knows is all this came back to her, the memories that she did remember, those gaps. Now, she didn't want to, she was like, how's this happen? And if I start telling my husband, you know, what I saw, maybe he's going to copy me, yeah. So she waits for him to speak. She's sitting there with a coffee, just waiting for him to open his mouth. And the first thing he says to her is, something really weird happened on that stretch of road. She's like, what do you mean? He says there were some figures standing on the road. And it was at this moment she realised that he remembered the same as her, and they started to discuss the details, and everything she'd remembered, he'd also remembered, with the same gaps in both their memories. Absolutely fascinating. The fact that happened to multiple witnesses, and they both had the same gaps, and all this bizarreness going on around it. Really interesting case. That wasn't the only experience she's had. There's other experiences she's also had. As with a lot of contact experiences, it's repeated. You get multiple encounters throughout your lifetime a lot of the time, and they're documented again in the report. But let's move on to another case. This is a historic case right back in 1937, which probably makes it the oldest case that I've ever sort of semi-looked into, and you'll see why. It involved a gentleman named George Marshall. He was the father of an experiencer, Katie Marshall, and her case I investigated in depth. She'd had quite a lot of experiences throughout her life, but I'm going to talk about the experience that her father had right back in 1937. Sadly now deceased, so I wasn't able to talk with him about this experience directly. It was passed on through me talking with Kathy about her experiences. But this experience happened to him as a child back in 1937 when he was only 11 years old, and it took place at this place, Honey Street, down in Wiltshire. Some of you will be familiar with the Barge Inn, an absolutely lovely place. It's got some stunning crop formation artwork all over the roof and stuff. Always worth a check out if you're down the Wiltshire area, and it's right alongside a canal. It's an absolutely lovely area. So Honey Street is right down there. That's where he used to live. And most Sundays he'd go for a walk, and he'd essentially, at different times back then in the 30s, he's only 11, right? But his parents were like, yeah, you can go out for a walk. So most weekends he'd go by himself, 11 years old, and walk around the fields, yeah? They thought it was completely safe, which back then, hopefully it was, yeah? So this is Honey Street in the middle there, you see it back there, with the icon, and that's the White Horse up down the hill, you can see a lot of open farmers' fields, both above and below Honey Street. You used to head off from there, kind of walk around here, go down there, and then back to where he started, back to Honey Street. And he'd do that walk by himself most weekends. So on this one particular day, lovely sunny day, and he was just out walking. He was somewhere north of Honey Street, we don't know exactly where, but one of these fields around here. And all of a sudden, he felt very, very strange. Didn't feel right, there's something going on. There were some unusual effects noted, which we'll go into, and these unusual effects seemed to last for a short period of time, and then it all kind of stopped and everything went back to normal. But when he arrived back home, so he carried on the walk, he thought, you know, just felt a bit odd, but I hadn't fallen over or anything. He just carried on with his walk, and when he got back, he realised he was kind of hours late, and apparently, like his own parents back then, gave him a good telling off, asked him where he'd been all that time, of course.
especially at 11, but there was this extensive period of time he couldn't account for. Now, it wasn't just Kathy's recollections of what her father told her, he'd also mentioned this experience in his autobiography. And she actually sent me the pages. That's interesting, I was talking about autobiographies earlier on. And she sent me the actual pages from his autobiography where he mentioned this case. And here we go. I'll try and read this out. My God, that's small. Let's see if I get, I'll get it up there, it's better up there. Yeah, I did have a very strange experience once when I was about 11. On Sundays, I would often go for long walks on my own. I'd go to Alton Hill, to Adams Peak, along the Rock to the White Horse, down the fields to the Bargin, and across the fields towards Woodborough, then across fields to home. It was probably about 3 miles or so. On this particular day, I left the canal and I was in a field, and quite suddenly I felt I had to stop. I wasn't ill, it felt like I'd been taken over by something. The field was very hot, even though the weather was not. I felt like I was being guided around an object which I can't describe. I also felt like I was being lifted into the air. Everywhere was deadly still. I felt like the field was full of people, but I couldn't see them. I just sensed it. Then, just as suddenly, all went back to normal, except the turf was still very hot where I was standing. I didn't feel afraid, I just carried on with my walk. The strange thing was I was very late getting home, and yet my route hadn't been any different from usual. I forgot about this event for many years. At 11 years old, I'd never heard of UFOs or the paranormal, and didn't even think to tell anybody about it until a few years ago, when my daughter had an experience with a UFO, and I was able to tell her. I think I may have had an induction experience. Ooh. As I said at the beginning of my story, the area around Alton Barnes is now a paranormal centre. So isn't that fascinating? But I wanted to point out a couple of words in his autobiography here. First of all, the field was very hot, even though the weather was not. Didn't we just hear that a minute ago in Thetford, didn't she? She suddenly started feeling very, very warm, very hot. Everywhere was deadly still. Oh, that's funny. The other lady in Thetford reported exactly the same thing. This sudden deathly stillness around her. So it's really interesting. So straight away you'll see links between two very different cases by different individuals there. And it's fascinating that you mentioned the same aspects. It's not the only aspects that occur, by the way. There's all sorts of weird things that can go on. Let's move on to Wyoming encounter. So not all the cases I investigate come from the UK. Sometimes they're from the States or elsewhere in the world. I've investigated as far wide as Australia. So I don't mind where people get in touch with me from wherever. And if they find out about the group or anything and want to talk about their cases. Obviously we live in an electronic world now, so I can set up a video call with them. And it's just like being in the room with them anyway. And get them to send me through drawings, etc. So this is part of one of the most extensive contact cases I've ever investigated. The individual is a man named Bill Turtle. We've documented over about 50 to 60 different individual experiences throughout his life. He's also served in the military and has had a couple of experiences which took place in the military, including one on the USS Indianapolis in the Mediterranean Ocean in the late 90s, where he saw essentially a white orb of light fly in, stop, and then just shoot straight vertical while out at sea. But yeah, lovely chap. I went through his experiences, so he'd seen things right back to childhood, and we documented it all sorts of experiences since an early age. This particular incident we're going to look at occurred in July 1995. And at this time, this was before Bill had joined the military, he was on his way over to Portland. He's a fan of a band called Fish, that's P-H-I-S-H, not Fish as in F-I-S-H. But he was on his way to Portland to check out one of their gigs, essentially. He was in the car by himself, just making a trek west across the country to check out this gig for a couple of days. And it occurred at roughly about 3 in the morning, not the gig, the experience. And he was driving along Highway 80, as you can see from this photograph, a very, very flat stretch of road. I think you've heard enough from me. I just want to hear from Bill himself.
Hi everyone. I wanted to thank you first for giving me the opportunity to speak, even though I'm not there. I'm in sunny Florida. Still get to explain at least an aspect of my story, and that I'm sure Dave is sharing with you. And I also want to thank Dave for everything he's done and us actually going through this whole experience of mine throughout my life with him, months of talking. It's been great. It's really helped me a lot with my own situation, my own feelings, just kind of dealing with it and actually at least accepting it and understanding a little better about what's happened in my life. But I wanted to tell you a story of a long time ago, in the mid-90s. I'm driving by myself on the highway in a car. I was following a band around, one of my favorite bands, just they were touring, and I decided to go on the road and go to the West Coast, see some shows. And so I was on Highway 80 and in Wyoming, and it's just open highway, desert, nothing around. You'll go 40, 50, sometimes 70 miles between gas stations and exits. You might not see other cars for miles and miles and miles. By myself in a car. I was okay for the most part, I was just driving overnight. I'm really trying to get to the West Coast as quick as possible. And I noticed at one point this light comes down into my view, down, not around the corner or up over a hill, but down into my view in the rearview mirror, really bright. Kind of sent chills down my spine, because I'm like, I kind of thinking maybe an airplane was flying behind me or something like that, but it just stood there. It just was right in my rearview mirror, and kind of just going the same speed as I was, 65, 75 miles an hour. It just kind of followed along as I drove, and started getting a little more paranoid, a little more afraid of what was going on. And there's just the fear of not knowing what that was I think the biggest part. And the strangest thing is like, the next thing I know, I'm sitting in a gas station, and don't know really how I got there. I maybe thought I fell asleep or something, but how did I park in a gas station while driving asleep? But I kind of just shook it off. It was just weird. I was like, maybe I zoned out, but no, it was weird. It was like 1 second I'm driving, freaked out. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in a gas station. And so I filled my car up with gas and just kind of hit the road again. And this is like middle of the night. And I'm driving along. Really not too soon after that, I started seeing the twilight of morning coming, and I was like, this is not right, because it should have been, 4:30, way before sunrise. But sun was coming up, and so then that started, I'm like, how long was I sitting in my gas station? I wasn't sleeping. I definitely, I put the seat down if I was actually taking a nap or something like that on the road, but I was just sitting upright in the car, which was really odd. And so it just kind of left me wondering what was going on, and that was pretty much one of the strongest cases of when I was actually literally missing time. But I just wanted to explain that story, and I really appreciate everyone listening. And there's been some interesting things happening in my life, but thank you guys.
So there we go, that's Bill. Almost feel like giving him a round of applause. He specially put that video together for me when I told him I was doing a talk on missing time. And a really fascinating incident there with some unusual elements. So I look at some in a bit more depth. So this is the white orb in the rearview mirror. He's drawn it there, coming down. So this is his view at the back of the road. Now, as you saw from that photograph, it's a very, very flat highway. It's not really hills or anything. So you can put out the question it being a star or something that was above the car that has then come down into his viewpoint. He said he was driving straight forward, it was on the flat, there's hardly any hills around, and this object all of a sudden it shoots down into view. And there's the arrow pointing, showing its kind of movement path into his line of sight. And straight away he's kind of freaked out by it. You would be. First of all, put yourself in this situation, middle of nowhere, what's going on here? There's nobody else around to help or anything. And also he'd had lots of other experiences by this point. So he was quite used to seeing strangeness going on in his life, and he knew what it may lead to in some encounters. So he had this missing memories of his journey to Rawlins. I don't know how well you can see that. That's, we think, you don't know exactly, but he thinks that's around the location where the incident took place, yeah, where he was driving along. And that is Rawlins, and you can see it's a fair whack away, yeah? There's miles and miles of driving, yeah? This is a river coming down here. I can't remember the exact name of the river, you'll be able to find that out, but I'll zoom in on the map inside the case report, whatever. But yeah, that's the location of the gas station where he ended up, yeah? So 1 minute he's there, he's driving along, there's white lights behind him, he's freaked out by it, yeah? He's very, very much awake, and bang, all instantly he's elsewhere, miles and miles away, sitting in the front of his car in a gas station car park that he has no recollection of driving up into. He's also not familiar with the route, so I don't believe this is highway hypnosis, which we mentioned earlier on. There's a lot of aspects which wouldn't fit with that. Just, you know, the sheer distance for a start, the fact that he didn't know it, and the fact that he was in this panicked state at the time, because really, highway hypnosis would only occur if you're kind of very relaxed and just letting things go on autopilot. There was this later confirmation of the missing time at the sunrise, so he's not only got the fact that he suddenly jumped to a new position, we've also got this element where it's like hours later than it should have been. So again, backing up the idea that he's lost time. We don't know what's happened that time, he's never recollected it. He's not interested in going for hypnosis. He said he'd rather let sleeping dogs lie. So yeah, that's one of his many experiences from Wyoming. And that, guys, is the end of the first part. We're going to be back soon and start looking at some full, complete missing time cases. I don't know how... It's got dark and spooky. Complete missing time. Here we go. So we're going to start with a case that happened really, really close to RAF in Lynham. The case involved 3 witnesses, a mother and her son and daughter. This one came out to me quite a long time ago, 2012, so I'd only been investigating for what, I don't know, 5 years, 4 years, something like that. Reached out to discuss the incident then, just the son. I did get to talk with the other 2 witnesses in due course as well and get statements from them. The incident took place in 1987. At the time the son was 13, his older sister 18 and his mother was 36. I'm not going to reveal their names. The father was stationed at RAF Lynham at the time, as part of one of the air crews there. So because of that, they lived smack bang near RAF Lynham. There's RAF Lynham, you can see a plane parked there. And this is the road they lived on, must be close. So very, very close to the edge of the RAF base. Now, one particular night, they don't remember the exact month this happened or anything, but the son woke up. It was early hours of the morning. He thinks between 1 and 2, but I don't think they actually checked the clock. But he kind of sensed it was like around that sort of time of night, fully dark, etc. There's a very, very strange sound which appeared to be emanating everywhere, but did seem to be kind of localised, not outside the house, but within it. They described it as a continuous, high-pitched ringing noise. I think it says something else, but something similar to ringing, maybe buzzing or something. But yeah, very, very high-pitched, continuous noise that seemed to fill the whole house. And he jumped up out of his bed, as you would, it's like, what's going on? And he runs through to his mother for comfort or whatever, and he finds that she was sleeping, so she was sleeping through the sound, yeah, she hadn't fully woken up, but he wakes her up by tapping her on the shoulder, she wakes up and then she can hear it too, and they're both there listening to this sound. A number of minutes later, the sister also enters the room, again for the same reason the son did, for comfort, and she can hear the noises woken her up too. So all 3 of them basically just get up on the bed and they're just sitting there on the bed listening to this continuous loud noise, wondering what's going on. A couple of minutes later, all of a sudden you can't really see the picture, so right, okay, that's actually a bedroom in dark. It's not a photograph, it's like a drawing of a bedroom, but it's kind of a bed here and people around there. So what happened was, through the open doorway of the bedroom, a small white orb, which I described about the sort of size of an apple or something, and it was a few foot off the floor. It starts gliding into the room and it's moving across the room slowly on a straight course. As it moves, it's very, very obvious that the sound is coming from it, because the sound is getting louder, they can hear it as it's crossing the room. Now it gets kind of roughly to where it was there on the picture, so it's moving across the room. They're all looking at it, really puzzled, and all of a sudden, that's it. That's it. None of them remember what happened next. Everything with the orb and of waking up and of hearing the high-pitched noise was completely gone from all three of their minds. They had no knowledge of it at all. They just went about their normal morning like nothing had happened during the night. Now, interestingly, the details did come back. They seemed to come back naturally, and they came back to the sun initially. A number of years went on. So a number of years went by, and all of a sudden, he's just out riding one day on his bike, and it just comes back to him like a memory. He just thinks back to it, and he's like, white orb crossing the room. And because nobody else had mentioned it or anything, that's got to be a strange dream, right? It's like, you don't usually see white orbs floating across your bedroom in the middle of the night, making high-pitched noises. It's got to be an odd dream. But he decides to mention it to his mum who's there on the bike ride with him. So he decides to bring it up with her, and he says, I've just remembered I had this strange dream a while back. It was about white orb or whatever. She remembered it. She'd recalled exactly the same thing. And get this, she'd also interpreted it as a dream. And then the two of them are discussing it, and they're like, it can't have been a dream, we're both remembering it. Now, they then went and quizzed the daughter, his older sister. They went and quizzed it with her. Remember the white orb? Came back to her then. She also remembered it, yeah? Oh my God, I thought it was a dream. So all three of them had independently remembered it, but interpreted it as a dream. Now, this is a picture that it's a mock-up that I did of what the daughter told me when I spoke with her. She saw it slightly differently. She remembered it being a white orb with these red lines out of it coming out of either side. Now, it's entirely possible that was some kind of flare, that her eyeballs were making or whatever because of the brightness of the light. It's not necessarily that it was different to her, but she remembered it as looking like that with this kind of red lines either side of the orb. But yeah, really fascinating case there. And that's basically it. There was another couple of experiences which I'm not going to go into because they don't involve this in time. But it was, yeah, again, fascinating. Multiple witnesses, and they all remembered it. Really, really interesting. So you can't say, it was just a dream, or it was just one person's interpretation, because all three of them had it, and all three of them had extensive missing time from it, and then it came back later on for whatever reason. Just natural recollection over a period of time. Let's move on to another interesting case. It's not Saw 10, by the way. Yeah, a contact case from Preston that I looked into. This one, probably about 5 years ago now, I looked into this case maybe. But yeah, they were again talking about a lifetime of experiences that went way back. I'm going to start with this particular experience. It doesn't involve this in time, but in May 2008, the main experience of John Gibberli and his daughter Callista, they had this interesting UFO sighting. They used to drive around the lanes, around the outskirts of Preston. They used to go out, father and daughter, just drive around the lanes, just having a good old chinwag. And they're out driving one evening on the outskirts of town. He doesn't remember the exact road position they were on, unfortunately. This mic, sorry, keeps on going off and touching it. And they noticed this bright white light. It's in the northwest. And it's quite far out. They'd seen a couple of interesting things before. Didn't really look like an aircraft. Couldn't see any red or green lights on it or anything. So they decided to pull up in the lay-by to see what happens and continue observing it. And it's very slowly approaches them. It's moving quite slow, so it takes a good 7 minutes to reach them. But it is coming like directly at them, essentially. They described it as, thought it was about 1,000 foot up, and essentially went by almost entirely overhead, just slightly off to one side from them. And looking up at the object, it was the shape of an iron. Interesting. Now, I've actually dealt with a number of other cases which have involved iron-shaped UFOs, believe it or not. And it was glowing a bronze colour, but John thinks that might have been reflection of the street lights of Preston, reflecting in the base of it, and it was actually metallic. But it just basically passed on a straight course, completely silent, and a very, very unusual shape there. I mean, you could say it was like a triangle, but sort of more curved, metallic copper colour, as I mentioned. So why have I mentioned that? It kind of leads on to this. Decided to report this sighting to the local newspaper, Lancashire Evening Post. Unfortunately, did not keep the article, so that's not in the case report. But later in the year, I could probably look it up, to be fair, but it'd be quite difficult without an exact date. But they'll have it on archive somewhere in Lancashire Library somewhere. But later that same year, he takes his daughter to Preston Guildhall to a music event that's going on there. That's a modern photograph of how Preston Guildhall looks today. Regular sort of music events take place there. And they're going up the escalator on the way into this building, and all of a sudden, a memory randomly pops into his mind here. He remembers a primary school friend named David. And he doesn't know why he's suddenly thinking of him. It's just like random. I haven't seen him in years and years, randomly thinking about this old primary school friend. Guess he's at the top of the escalator. That's right. So David's standing right there. Now, in many, many contact cases I've looked into, and this could be a lecture in itself, there's a psychic element that shows up time and time again, where people often have precognition of future events, premonitions, kind of heightened sensitivity, sometimes can claim to be able to astral project, etc. So there's a psychic element, and that occurs very, very regularly. But yeah, it's a possible premonition there that he was going to meet with his friend, and was coming up into his mind randomly. But his friend confirmed that he'd read the newspaper article on the UFO report. He thought it was really interesting. It was like, it was really cool. They were talking about this UFO sighting, and he said, "Hey, you remember that sighting we had as a kid?" John's like, "What?" And he'd essentially had another previous sighting with David that he had no recollection of. And David started to talk about what had taken place with this incident, and that triggered the memories of the incident, and then he recalled it to an extent. But up until that point, he had no knowledge of it yet, and it would just come back through the trigger of talking about it. He remembered being 13 to 14 years old at the time, and he was living on a place, Lulworth Road in Preston, and it's a nice sunny, bright sunny day, and him, his friend David, and another friend Paul, they're out playing hide and seek in the local neighbourhood, just kind of out there, hot summer's day. That's we've got a map here. So this is where he lived at the time, and this is where he decided to hide with David. They got down, there's this house on the corner with some tall hedges, and they thought, oh, that's a good hiding spot. We'll just duck down and hide down behind the hedges, and Paul will never find us there on Kensington Road. So they're there, ducked down. There's a photograph of how the house looks on the corner. You can see the hedges still there today. So all of a sudden, Dave shouts out. He says, "Look up!" You know, he says, "There's something above us." And they could only have a thin strip of skylight looking up. If you imagine they're between the house and the hedge, so they've got this thin line of sky. And they look up, and there's a very, very bizarre object above them in the sky. Now, what John described it as a metallic spiral-shaped object. Now, it's possible it was an actual spiral like that, or it's possible it was just light reflecting off it, and it had kind of undulations which made it look like a spiral. But either way, it was more like a disc. We don't really know. It's possible some of it was kind of very, very brightly reflecting light, making it look like gaps. But essentially, this thing was moving along on a kind of straight course above them, and he said it was like swirling water going down a plug, or that's how he described it, rotating continuously. David then advises they run away. He's quite frightened of this object above them. There's no idea what it is. And he advises them to just get out of there. And John agrees with that, and they basically both run away. That was his last memory. His last memory is stepping out onto the pavement. Now, that doesn't mean there's another missing time event, yeah? All it means is it wasn't important to him anymore. It's the end of the sighting, yeah? So he probably just kind of ran back to his house or whatever. He's got no detailed recollection of that. It's not necessarily a missing time. This is the testimonial statement that I got off David. So I reached out to David for a testimony from him. Whenever I do this with other witnesses, I do it independently at a later date, and usually I don't warn them because I don't want them collaborating with the other witnesses. It's always get it independently. And this is what he told me. I spotted this thing spinning through the sky. It was like a disc, had a repeating shape which reminded me of a flying swastika. It was dark silver coloured and was continuously rotating. It was quite high up but clear enough to see. There were no lights on it. It was so weird. As soon as we'd seen it, it just went and carried on out of sight. It was flying on a straight course, spinning through the sky. It seemed quite big. It didn't look massive, but from how high it was, it seemed about the same size as a medium-sized aircraft. It was too high and too big for a remote-controlled toy, and occurred way before drones existed. So that was his direct statement I got from him. And you can see there the similarity with what John had already told me about what happened. Really interesting case. And there's an example there, a triggered recollection of missing time. So now we're going to move on to this absolutely stunning case. don't know whether I mentioned this one before. It's a case from Glasgow. You may have heard me mention it in the screen memories, possibly, because it has some screen memory elements. If you've not heard this case before, it's pretty fascinating. Lots and lots of experiences again for this gentleman. I'm only going to go over one, which is a dual abduction case involving him and his brother. Man's name is Rob. It's occurred 25th of November 1971. How can he be that accurate? How on earth can he know the exact dates of something that happened in the 1970s? Now, the reason he knows the exact date is because he wrote it down. So for the early years of his life, till about the age of 35 or something, he was writing down his experiences in a diary, which was brilliant. Now, usually if I'm going back historic cases with people, it's just done on their recollection. He'd been writing it down because he could see that lots of odd things were happening, and he was starting to write them down. He'd even drawn some drawings. So straight away handed me all this information, and I had loads of great notes on his earlier experiences to go with some witness drawings that had already been done in advance for me, which was amazing. It was on his house, and this is House Hill Muir Road in the outskirts of Glasgow, and his house used to be just here on the right. It's his garden with his low fencing. It's in the area known as Pollock. He's there with his brother and his cousin who was babysitting them for the night. On this night in question, his parents had gone out to some kind of event, and they got his cousin to come and babysit him and his brother. So there was a show on television, The Untouchables gangster show, and it was airing on TV at the time. And he was looking forward to watching this show. It was a kind of a little bit, naughty. He's just a child and everything. He's like, ooh, gangsters and guns and stuff's going to be fun. But unfortunately, that night there was a delay to the programmes, and it was actually starting half an hour later, which coincided, incidentally, with his bedtime. And he wasn't happy about this at all. So he starts arguing with his cousin. His cousin's trying to get him to go to bed. He's like, no, I want to see the programme. As they're arguing, all of a sudden, the whole living room is flooded with bright white light. It's clear that this light is coming in from outside, so the curtains are open in the living room, and this white light's flooded in, and it's just filling the entire room. The cousin's immediately quite scared of what this light could be, and she's saying, don't go to the window. But Rob's absolutely fascinated, and he runs across to the window to see if he can see where it's come from. And he looks out, and what he said he saw is on the other side of the road, you could see a round patch of light that was clearly kind of coming down from something above, higher than the window that he couldn't see. And it was moving along the road, this patch of light. You could see it going along the houses, and it went up the wall of one of the houses, a few houses along, and that sort of thing. It was moving, and it moved out of sight. Now, he didn't want the experience to end there. He was fascinated in where this light was and what was going on with it. So he pushes past his brother, runs outside the front of the house, and runs down the steps. I don't know if you can see the steps. Yeah, there's some steps there they are. Runs down these steps and runs there to the end of the path. And he stands right there near the pavement. And he looks down the road to where this white light has been. So as I said, he ran straight past his brother against his cousin's wishes. And what he said he saw was this. You could see a white glowing disc. It was hovering just behind that house there. It almost looked like a cake with a slice cut out of it because of the triangular roof cutting into it. But it was hovering here. This is where he was standing looking at it. So several doors away. And it's completely silent, and there's bright white light flooding out of this object. And his joined by his brother, because his brother's fascinated in what's going on as well, comes down standing next to him. And this colour was so bright, the white light was so bright, it was bleeding out all the colour of the surroundings, and he said like everything looked like it was in black and white. So he's looking around like this and fascinated by the way it's draining all the colour out of everything. And he looks back round to the disc, and he notices they are no longer alone. So to his right, with its hand on his right shoulder, now stands another being. He's drawn an actual picture of it here. This is a pencil drawing. This is a sketch that he did originally with his diary. I didn't ask him to do this. He'd already done it decades in advance. That's his brother. That's him. That is a being, which their children remember. So the being looked about 5 foot high. It was wearing black overalls. That's interesting. Didn't we see that in a previous case? Thetford again. And it's got a bald head, just like that. But they can't see its face because it's also staring towards the disc, which is drawn there behind the roof of the house. You can see the top of the house jutting into it. Not into it, just kind of blocking the view of a bit of it. And this being's got its hand on his shoulder, doesn't talk with him at all. They're just all standing there staring at the disc. Next thing he knows, bang, it all changes. Now, him and his brother are standing and they're surrounded in glowing pink energy of some kind, like a bubble all around them, like a sphere of kind of glowing neon pink energy of some kind. The being is no longer there. Him and his brother are still standing there in exactly the same position. This energy, it starts to kind of break apart, essentially dissipate and dissolve, and as it goes, he starts to see bits of daylight coming through it. And he realises it's now no longer night time when he was seeing the disc, it's the following morning. He didn't know it was the following morning, he just knew it was daylight. It was broad daylight, and they're standing there. But not only that, yeah, this is they're not actually at the same position anymore either. He's actually here. This is a side path. Yeah, this is the house that the disc was behind. So the disc was about there, yeah, by those trees that you can just about see. This is a side path that cuts through to the other adjoining road. Halfway down it, there is an electrical generator which is still there to this day. Him and his brother were standing there by this electrical generator in exactly the same position they'd been a second earlier outside their house. Now, he's absolutely confused by this. The pink energy completely dissolves away, it's broad daylight. Now up here, there's a window and it's got a lady in it and she leans out the window and shouts, she sees them out the window and shouts down at them. And what she says to them, she says, "Are you the boys that have been missing all night?"
Oh my God.
Now, what we gather from this, and what we think happened, is probably the parents had come home from their evening out, yeah? Who knows what the cousin did or didn't recollect, right? Unfortunately, I haven't been able to speak with her. But essentially, parents found the boys not there. Maybe they suspected something had happened, they didn't know what had happened, but they probably got the police involved. We don't really know the full details on that. And the reason we don't know the full details on that is coming up in about 2 seconds. So essentially, Rob's spooked out by everything that's happening. He doesn't answer the woman. Oh, there was a boy as well. There was a boy, I forgot to mention the boy. There was a boy sitting next to him playing with a toy fire truck on the ground. And he was right next to them and he was just staring up at him and his brother like that. For all we know, he saw them materialise out of thin air. We don't really know because they never spoke with him to ask him what he saw. He was just a little kid there. Rob realises it's not his own house and wants to get back to his own house, so he runs down the side passage, yeah, and starts running back towards his house. As he does, he realises the memories are literally leaving his brain, yeah. He can feel the missing time coming over himself. Now, I've actually investigated numerous cases where that's been reported, where people have realised that they're actually forgetting memories. Really fascinating. By the time he reaches his front door, he's got no knowledge of the experience at all. Doesn't remember the disc, doesn't remember the being, doesn't remember standing there. And we assume neither does his brother. Now, what we do know, he said that in the years following that, he used to go fishing with his father, and his father would quite regularly bring up the subject of UFOs and alien abductions, and he wonders whether his father assumed that maybe that had happened to them and was trying to get him to remember more details, but he never said that directly or anything. And unfortunately his father's now passed away. But they moved house. He said they moved house within a year of that. I mean, you could say it's just coincidence, right? But he wonders whether they moved because of what happened. But the memories were lost, but they weren't lost for good, were they? Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to tell you about what happened. He wouldn't have written it down in his diary or anything. They were lost for a number of years until the summer of 1986. And the trigger this time was a follow-on incident. Now, on this occasion, he'd gone round to see a friend and on Vanguard Street in Drumree, another area of Glasgow, and essentially it's a bright sunny day and they're out there playing in the garden, and his friend's mother and sister are also there, just sitting up on the steps, just watching them, and they're playing with the pet dog in the garden and chucking a frisbee around on the front lawn. And so, yeah, as I said, they're down the front door. And he catches it, all of a sudden, he catches this glimpse of some kind of blurred white object. And he instinctively ducks, thinking it's a frisbee that's been thrown his way. But it wasn't the frisbee. He gets back up, no frisbee, but what was there was a white domed disc-shaped object hovering in broad daylight. Now, it's written there 7 to 9 metres, his estimation of its size. Now, interestingly, it had all these kind of burn marks, so it's white, but he said across the top, it was kind of like scorch marks across the top of the thing, which is very unusual. I don't think we've ever come across any other cases with that particular aspect. It was quite low down, he thinks it was hovering about 200 foot in the sky, and it was completely motionless first, and completely silent. within a minute the thing starts moving and it moves off slowly, heading to the southwest from their location, and they watch it go, watch a number of minutes, and it heads off, and eventually they lose sight of it because of the other buildings. They run upstairs and it reaches the River Clyde. When it gets to the River Clyde, it performs a right angle turn and starts to kind of follow along the edge of the river, and eventually kind of goes out of sight and they lose track of it. There's Vanguard Street, you can see the front doors here, you can see the steps. So I don't know if this is the exact house, but you can see that's to indicate the types of gardens I've got there. So he went back outside to discuss this object with his friend, and his friend was just saying, it must have been a remote controlled model, and he's like, are you joking? It's like much too big to be a remote control model and that sort of thing. He's saying this is far more unusual than what you're giving it credit for yet. So they're all discussing this incident they've just seen, and all of a sudden they hear a loud roaring noise, and the next thing they know is two jets fly over the house at the time at low altitude. Now it's very, very rare for that to happen, especially in daylight hours across suburban areas. It's not really allowed by the military, but he later identified them as Harriers because he's got an interest in aviation and he knew the kind of shape of the things. At the time he didn't know they were Harriers, but he thinks that they were, and he says that they basically shot over the house and headed off towards the direction which the object had vanished in. So it looks like we've got a possible military interception. Now, without exact details and that sort of thing, it's very, very hard to go back on. I've raised numerous freedom of information requests with the MOZ before, but they demand specifics. They want to know times, dates, etc., etc. We don't have that with this. But what we do think is they possibly came from RAF Lossiemouth. And that's a good 100 miles away, but it's the closest RAF base of any size near to that location. So, and obviously 100 miles is next to nothing when you're up in a jet moving at that speed. So that later sighting of this UFO, it triggers the memories and they come back to him. Another fascinating case. That's a really big case, lots of incredible experiences throughout his life, which you can read about. So let's move on to possible reasons. Why is this all going on? You've seen a whole bunch of cases there, really interesting stuff. What's going on with this? How is missing time occurring and why? So there's a number of possible reasons. What exactly is going on? So we know that missing time occurs extremely regularly with contact and sightings. What I've given you here is a small snippet of the amount of times that I've heard people mention missing memories. Some of the known causes for lost memories, they can be largely discounted pretty much straight away, I would say. So people of all ages and sexes, etc., experience missing time. It can't be down to age-related forgetfulness. Now, you'd be able to spot that pattern. You'd be like, oh, the older the contactee gets, the less memories they've got. Yeah, it's not like that at all. I've dealt with cases involving children, teenagers who've had missing time in their contact experiences. It's very unreasonable to assume that experiences of missing time are just mentally ill or suffering from medical issues, or take that and nail it to the mast, yeah? It happens far too regularly for that to be the case for a start, yeah? And secondly, I've dealt with some cases where people have literally thought, is this medical? Am I ill or something? And they've literally gone to their GP, and their GP has essentially classed them as having a normal mental health. It's a nice catch-all, isn't it? That, you could say, if you don't want to say the contact's role, you could be like, oh, they're just mad, clearly all of them. This is really, really big. This is happening to a lot of people. In most cases, the individuals confirmed that they were sober at the time. Now, you could say, oh, they might tell you that, of course, yeah. But in a lot of cases, they're out driving. I've dealt with like some of the cases you've seen. And we're not taking any medications at the time either. So I do ask them these tough questions. And there have been some cases where I've thought that it might be medical, and I will literally advise that they go and speak with their GP in those cases. Some driving incidents could be down to highway hypnosis. You definitely can't rule that out. So this leaves a number of possibilities that are definitely worth looking into for what's going on with this. So missing time is either going to be something that's happening naturally in the brain, right, or it's something that's being done intentionally as part of the experience. It's got to be one of those two things. And there's 4 explanations that we're going to delve into a bit now. First of all, a response to trauma. A fragile emotional state. Is it a proximal side effect? And I'll explain more what I mean by that in a minute. Or is it an artificial memory block? So let's start with a response to trauma. So what we do know, sightings and contact experiences, they can certainly be extremely frightening for the individual involved.
A lot of the time, the beings won't say much. They'll be in unfamiliar places. They might have procedures done on them which can sometimes hurt or at least be uncomfortable or unpleasant. They very rarely say much to them about what's going on or what's taking place. It can certainly be very frightening indeed. And if the individuals looked into the subject before they've had the experience, yeah, that can enhance that fright even more, because they'll be going, oh no, I know what comes next, yeah, and that can lead to a fear anticipation of what might happen to them in that experience because of other cases they've looked into or seen on things. Now, there's many cases on record where people have lost memories through trauma. This is a very, very real thing. The brain will automatically block out traumatic memories. This gentleman, Avi Folman, he's served in the Lebanon War, and he essentially witnessed firsthand a massacre of civilians where they gathered them all up and shot them all. And it was so traumatic to him that his brain blocked it out. There's actually screen memory elements with this as well, which I won't go into, but he remembered them as other things and that sort of thing. But he was fascinated by this gap in his memories. He was like, something must have happened, something happened when we were there, I know it did. And he actually went out and started meeting other people who'd served in the war with him and asking them and interviewing them, and slowly he pieced together what had taken place, and the memories eventually came back to him. And it was actually turned into a film, a documentary movie called Waltz with Bashir. It's not well known, some of you may have seen it. It's absolutely excellent. It takes the actual interviews that he gave, the real audio from those, and overlays it with animated sequences. It's pretty hard stuff, but it's certainly worth checking out if that sounds interesting, and you'll see him try to explore and get back those traumatic memories. Now, it's perhaps the experiences they can't mentally cope with what's taking place yet, so the memories are blocked out from their minds naturally, just like what happened with Abby. And that might be responsible for some cases. I'm not saying that that doesn't take place and that couldn't be responsible. But you get cases where those involved, they're not really that frightened, they're more fascinated by what's happening. You think that with contact that most people would be terrified of it, but in actual fact it's probably about a 50-50 split. A lot of the time the experiences are actually more positive, and people kind of even view the beings as a kind of extended family. And that might come about over a period of time, but sometimes it seems to have been there from the off, yeah? So they're not frightened, but they still experience missing time, right? So it doesn't really fit with that. And it's also can't really explain cases where you've got multiple experiences reporting the same blocks of missing time, like you've seen with Thetford, yeah? Because it's very unlikely that their brains would have wiped out exactly the same sequences. It doesn't make sense. So let's move on to what it is next. Is it a fragile emotional state that they're under? So having a UFO contact experience, it can result in all sorts of different strange after effects, some of them very long lasting. Yeah? During the experience they can be confused both before and after it regarding what's taken place. That confusion can lead to people being stressed or having long-term depression, panic attacks from their experiences. Now, also ridicule by the general public. You know, we're living in a world now where things are starting to get more understanding, especially with what's been happening in the States, since 2017. But there's still a lot of ridicule, especially here in the UK, towards the subject, it's sad to say. So ridicule or a negative response from even their own family or the friends don't understand what they're going through. That can cause a lot of isolation. People don't understand, they feel like they're on their own and they've got nobody to turn to, which, you know, again, can cause these effects. Now, they can have subconscious recollection of it. So even though they're not remembering it consciously, their brain remembers it, yeah? Maybe they have weird dreams or whatever, but it can lead to deep anxiety and even phobias, like lifelong phobias. Some examples there, going to the dentist. I've dealt with numerous contactees who are terrified of going to the dentist because it reminds them of their experience. Elevators or vertigo. I've dealt with numerous experiences who've got deep vertigo because of actually remembering being lifted up into a craft, and it's led to them having vertigo. Clowns, fear of clowns, that's like the porcelain doll effect again, because it reminds them of the beings and creeped out by the kind of white face paint and that. So it's known that these high emotional states, yeah, they can result in missing memories. We already know that, I discussed that earlier on in the talk, yeah. So could these after effects, yeah, of what's happening with this, the confusion, the panic attacks, could that be the cause of lost time? Maybe. seems unlikely to be fully responsible for the phenomena, I would say, again due to the regularity, etc., and just the amount of cases on record. And as I've said before, a lot of people don't have these traumatic after effects. It's improbable that it would result in entire events being lost from memory. Usually with stress or anxiety, you get some missing memories, you don't get entire things blocked out. That usually comes from the sort of deeper level of trauma, like we've already discussed. So, proximal side effects. What do you mean by that, Dave? Let's have a look. So there's all sorts of highly unusual aspects that are reported with these experiences, both with sightings of craft and deeper contact experiences. Unnatural quietness, we already heard me talk about that. Shutting down of particular individuals. So let's say they want one particular individual, by they I mean the beings, let's say they want one particular person to undergo that contact experience, but there happens to be their spouse or their family next to them, they can switch them off. And they can enter a sort of trance-like state where the person, and sometimes they'll be standing up and with their eyes open, but they'll be completely unconscious. Altered states of perception, so people are overly complacent towards what's going on. Electronic anomalies, just lights flickering and other electronic devices in the house going wrong. So Einstein's theory of relativity, it states, that time is relative, and many of you are going to be aware of this after watching such films as Interstellar, for example. So time has been proven to move slower in the presence of a strong gravitational field. So, for example, black holes, if you could approach a black hole, time would get slower and slower and slower the closer you got to its core. Could these craft that people are seeing, these objects, call them UFOs, UAPs, objects, whatever you like, could they be emitting some kind of field of a gravitational nature that causes an element of time dilation? So I've dealt with quite a few cases where people have reported that time moves slow or time appears to have stopped entirely during these contact experiences. So that, in essence, that would result in the experience for the person taking much longer than it did for everybody else outside. So if you think about it, that's missing time. That's actual missing time. Now, you've also got other elements. You've got the telepathic contact that goes on with these beings. So most of the time in contact, the beings don't talk using their mouth. I'm talking about multiple different types, not just greys here. They'll talk, but they won't move their mouth. They talk through their mind directly with people in their own language. Now, that involves a direct two-way link. So the person can talk back to the beings using their mind, and they can have a conversation with them. Often they won't want a conversation with them, but sometimes they do. Perhaps that communication has an unintentional side effect on the human brain that creates fragmented or lost memories as a result of having that telepathic link with these beings. Maybe the beings themselves emit some kind of biological field that causes time dilation. Now, if you take that into account, that could be why the amount of recollection varies considerably, because maybe it's how closely the beings have got to people and that sort of thing. Or maybe they've got a natural tolerance. Maybe some people have a natural tolerance to this effect, and that way they can remember more of the details or can remember things entirely where other people forget. Worth considering. Let's move on to our last possible explanation here, an artificial memory block. So this would be where the beings themselves are purposely blocking out the memories using either telepathic abilities or some kind of advanced technology. This is the most commonly believed explanation for missing time. So most people, when they're looking at contact, looking at missing time, they're like, the beings are doing that on purpose. That's part of it. It's part of the experience. Could these beings really possess that level of power to take control of our brains and make us remember what we want? Well, let's have a look. Well, we know that they can hear and respond directly to human thoughts. That's been seen in hundreds and hundreds of contact cases on records. They can shut down people, as I said, they can switch off people, leaving them in this trance-like state. They can sometimes appear in other forms. I've already mentioned that in my previous talk of screen memories, so people can remember something completely different, like a pet, or a family friend, or a man in a suit, or whatever, all sorts of different things. Now, it's entirely possible for humans, let alone aliens, to mentally manipulate people into forgetting memories using hypnotic suggestion. And I've got an example of that right here. It's Darren Brown.
Our cinema audience has now watched the film after absorbing my special ad. We stopped them on their way out to see what they could remember.
Why don't you tell me about the film you just saw?
it's a bit weird.
So how often do you go to the film?
I think it last month.
Is there a particular genre you like or don't like?
I like foreign movies.
But this one you...
Right, well, the thing is, I was just talking to my friend Wayne, and I don't remember anything about the movie at all, and I know my head's been fucked with.
It's about a heist that goes wrong, and then it comes together because the guy's got to contact with his mother.
If I try to picture the actual scene, I see like a sit. It's going to sound even worse, like just a sit.
I remember the whole film. Yeah, whole thing. Yeah, wicked, awesome film.
I can only remember like Catholic, like going into the cinema, and then like when we came out, my mind just went blank. I don't know why.
So there we go, yeah. Derek Brown uses a mix of magic tricks and hypnotic suggestion to create some stunning effects. We actually saw him just the other week do his latest show. He's an absolutely brilliant magician. But you can see there, whatever he did with that film, essentially a lot of the people who went to see it, they had no memory of it to come out, they've just seen it for 2 hours or whatever, and they can't remember the plot. It's amazing. So when experiencers attempt to retrieve the lost memories via hypnotic regression, they sometimes talk about being blocked from speaking about these events. Now things get really interesting. So I said earlier on, I've worked on some hypnotic regression cases and sat in on the regressions, and sometimes the person won't have memories of something that's happened in their experience, and they try to break through it with the hypnotic regression. But sometimes that works, yeah, and they remember it, and sometimes still doesn't, even on hypnosis. And this is from such a case. You step into the light, this is part of the transcript, you step into the light, what happens next, what do you see? I just see a black wall. You can move past this, step past this wall and describe what you see. I can't, they won't let me say. Who won't let you say? I don't know, I'm not allowed to talk about it. Isn't that fascinating? So I've dealt with quite a few cases where this is a general feeling by the experiencer. They'll feel kind of almost naughty about talking about it afterwards with somebody. And sometimes that's actually led to people stopping talking with me mid-investigation because they get too uncomfortable and they're like, I'm not supposed to be telling you this stuff. I feel like something bad's going to happen. Now, nothing bad does happen when people talk about the experiences. There's no case on record where they've said stuff and then something bad's happened to them as a result, yeah, like some sort of punishment, right? But it's almost, they feel like almost like a naughty school child has been told off, for saying things. Very interesting indeed. Okay, so we've established, let's say, okay, brilliant, they're doing this intentionally. Why? Why are they going to be doing this? Number of possible reasons. Maybe it's to reduce the fear of recollecting the experience. Like they care about the person, they care about themselves, and they don't want them to remember the experience. So to be nice to them, they block out those memories. Maybe it's to allow the experiencer to go about their daily life and act completely naturally, yeah? Just the same as we do with nature. When we're studying animals, we sit in a hive and we watch at distance and we let them go about their normal daily life. Maybe they're doing exactly the same with us. They don't want us to know this is going on because they're observing us in our natural state and they don't want us to know that this is happening. Maybe it's to remain covert from us. Maybe they're doing this intentionally because for one reason or another, they don't want the human race to know about their existence. Why haven't they landed on the White House lawn? Yeah, because they don't want to. This is been going on for a long time. If they wanted to make themselves publicly known, and yes, I know there are some cases that go against that, like the classic case of Phoenix Lights, or some of you will know the Swansea Night Triangles, of course. So, there are some cases that are very public where you've got a lot of activity going on all in one place, and you're like, isn't that like acting very uncovertly? But that's trying to humanise something that isn't human. So screen memories may also be implemented for exactly the same reason as missing time, yeah, if it's intentional. What exactly are they doing with this then? Let's say they're doing it intentionally. What are they doing? So nobody knows for certain, yeah, and it'd be wrong of me to pretend that I know, yeah, and if you ever hear any researchers say that they know, they don't, okay? There are various theories with evidence directly supporting all of those different theories. Is it the telepathic minds of these beings? Are they implanting some sort of, like a strong hypnotic suggestion to not remember it, and through that telepathy, the person doesn't remember it? Maybe they're injecting them with some kind of drug, either using either a needle or something else. There's quite a lot of contact cases where people have had needles used on them by the beings, but there's no direct correlation between those cases and missing time. And there's certainly a lot of missing time cases where they don't remember that particular thing, but it's still a possibility, right? Maybe the beings are so advanced, they've got highly advanced capabilities, and they can actually sever the brain neurons directly. So some kind of advanced technology that's literally severing the neurons in the brain, cutting out those memories from their minds directly. Don't really know. Why is the amount of time forgotten so variable? Why do some people remember it all? Some people remember fragmented, other people lose the whole experience for years on end. Well, perhaps it's intended that the memories will always be completely forgotten, right? And it's kind of accidental when they don't. Maybe they've not perfected this process. The human brain is too complex for them to work with, and they try to block out the memories, but sometimes the memories come back via flashbacks, dreams, or it just doesn't work on the person at all. In the same way that some people can't be hypnotised and other people can be. Another possibility is that they're doing this intentionally, and they're letting certain people remember those experiences or certain parts of the experience for an intentional reason of unknown means. Why? We don't really know. I would, be pretentious to work that out, but it's very interesting, and again, a possibility. So we've looked at those different possible reasons, and it's time to kind of wrap up now with a few conclusions to wrap up the talk. So, first of all, missing time is a fascinating, very real aspect of many sighting and contact cases. You've just seen a few of the examples that I've investigated directly this evening with those cases. It's my view that in most cases, it's something intentional, something that's being done by the beings on purpose. And I think that they also do the same thing with the screen memory phenomena, which I've written a previous lecture on that some of you will have seen. It's also possible that in some cases it has occurred naturally. I can't put that out of the question as a kind of defence mechanism, because it's too weird, it's too bizarre, it's too outside the norm for the person, so the brain naturally blocks it out, or the trauma they experience, or some kind of side effect of time distortion going on. I can't ignore the time dilation aspects of these cases, which could well lead to missing time as a result. There's likely to be many incidents going on right now that have occurred with the individuals involved. They've got no knowledge of it at all because they're currently in the period of time where they don't remember it. Or maybe they'll never remember it, maybe they go their whole lives. Now that's a little bit disturbing, because really, if you think about it, that means that you, every single one of you in this room, could have potentially had one or more experiences of this nature and not even be aware of it at all. Even though you've got a big interest in the UFO subject. The phenomena, it makes working out timeline of events extremely challenging, because if there's constant fragments in their memory, it's very, very hard to piece together how long things took, especially when you're trying to establish whether a person was taken at the same time as somebody else witnessed a craft in the vicinity or whatever. It makes all that quite hard work sometimes when you've got those missing time elements. But I will say that I hope you've enjoyed time here tonight, and it's not been missed, and you remember this talk for many years to come. I'm David Hodrien from Birmingham UFO Group. Thank you very much for your time. I've got a few more tidbits for you here. First of all, this lovely little quote from Lou Brunel. You have to begin to lose your memory, if only bits and pieces, to realise that memory is what makes our lives. Life without memory is no life at all. Our memory is our coherence, our reason, our feeling, even our action. Without it, we're nothing. A superb, very powerful quote. Some details on my group. You've probably already seen the banner over there, but the main website where you'll see the case reports for these ones and hundreds of other cases are on bootfog.com. You can go into the investigation cases section, and it's got a search facility, so you can type in particular town names, districts, you can type in types of objects seen, like triangle or sphere or whatever. You can type in dates, like a particular month and year for whatever. We've also got our Facebook community page, Bootfog Truth Seekers. We have an organisation page as well, if you look for Birmingham UFO Group on Facebook. But Bootfog Truth Seekers is where we talk between our meetings. There's about 2,000 people in there at the moment, and you can talk and ask questions, that sort of thing. Get in touch with me via that.
His ICER.network is the website for ICER. You can have a look at more at what I'm doing that and what I'm doing with ICER. Essentially, we've got representatives from all around the world, from different countries, all working together towards common goals. Lastly, UFO Wave, which I've got a few copies of over there, my midlife crisis. Essentially say UFO-themed card game which I put together, the most accurate portrayal of the UFO subject ever seen in a tabletop game, and the artwork has been done by an experiencer from New York who I reached out to do the art for the game because I liked his artwork style. So that's UFO Wave. It's no longer UFOWaveGame.com, that site doesn't exist anymore. There's a section on the Birmingham UFO Group website where you can find out playtests and see how the game plays, and you can order privately via the post, or just pick it up today if you want to come chat with me about it. I can tell you about it. No need to buy, just come and have a chinwag about it. And that is it, Beyond the Veil, an analysis of the missing time phenomenon. Thank you again. I don't know whether we've got time for any Q&A, probably not. Is it late-ish? I don't know. If anybody's got any questions, I'll happily answer them. Yeah? Well, 1 second. Sorry.
I just, regarding like crop circle research,
yes.
It's interesting that there are many experiences where people have strange time, like the Oz effect in crop formations, where they, they feel they've been there for a long time, it's a short time, or the other way around.
Yes.
So it's weird, you're talking about time effect.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. Again, you've got the time dilation there. So what Alan's talked about there is the time dilation effect that goes on with certain crop formations where people have entered them and feel like time's slowed down. So again, you're seeing these similarities between different aspects of the subject. And I mentioned towards the start of the talk, it doesn't necessarily have to involve contact. I know the cases we've gone over tonight have involved contact, but I've dealt with quite a few cases where people have just seen an object up in the sky, like a UFO at distance, and they've still had missing time after the experience. So yeah, fascinating. Thanks for that, Alan. Yes, Chris.
Have you ever come across any where it involves time slips?
Time slips, absolutely, yeah. So in building this database, so far, between 2007 to 2014, 2 time slip incidents I've got documented, so it's quite rare. I've got a few cases where people have also experienced changing surroundings. So, like all of a sudden, they're driving along a road that they know, and all of a sudden they don't recognise the roads around them, almost like they've got lost, but they shouldn't have, like they've moved to a different position, and they've had to actually follow road markings to get back to where, but that could be like missing time. It's possible they had contact, and it was blocked out, because, contact can occur in a vehicle, as we saw with Bill's case. But yeah, I mean, occasionally you've got time slip sinking in with it. I've dealt with a few cases involved in that element, and time slips fascinate me. In fact, most areas of the paranormal fascinate me to some extent, and I could have easily been a general paranormal investigator, but my passion is UFOs, UAPs, so I decided to focus on that. But I've still got a big interest in ghost phenomena, etc. So yeah, very interesting. So at the back. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Have you read about the time slips in Liverpool?
Bond Street.
And
Old
some
Street.
people have experienced a time slip.
Yeah.
They've been experiencing for 10 15 minutes, but they've put 8 hour time. They've missed about 7 hours, So
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard about that. It's really, really interesting. See, the thing about time slips, I think it's more kind of linked with what you would describe as spectral phenomena rather than UFO. There's no direct correlation, but there's all sorts of crossovers, right? It's one big puzzle. This whole thing is one big puzzle. Take my word on it. There are links between the UFO subject and near-death experiences. Lots of links with like the paranormal. I mean, you would consider like the white orb. Maybe that's paranormal. Maybe that wasn't anything to do with off-worlders or anything, but something else entirely. Yeah, again, time slips, I've dealt with some cases, but they've come my way. But then cryptid cases, I've dealt with a few cases involving Bigfoot-type creatures seen by people. But then you've got cases on record where people have seen a UFO, and then they've seen a Bigfoot-type creature. So how do you interpret that? You're saying that Bigfoot are alien beings? We don't really know. There's a lot of unanswered questions with different information kind of suggesting certain things. But yeah, time slips, very fascinating subject. Yes, sir.
Have you looked into consciousness abduction and bilocation?
Remind me what biological, I think I have, I know it.
So consciousness abduction, out of body.
You're talking about metaphysical abduction, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I call it metaphysical. So physical abduction is where people think that they've literally been taken up into a craft physically, and there's even some cases on record, not many, but there's some cases on record where other people have looked around the entire house for them and they literally are gone, yeah? And then later on they'll show up, kind of like Travis Walton, yeah? I mean, the police and everybody was looking for him. Metaphysical abduction is where somebody undergoes an abduction experience, but there are other people in the vicinity that are like, you didn't go anywhere, you were right there, and yet they're still seeing greys and they're still seeing craft interiors and that sort of thing. Now, some people might interpret that as, oh, this is all in the mind then, isn't it? But it's not, because there's all sorts of physical elements, and I could do an entire lecture on the physical elements of contact with body markings and implants and other bits and bobs. So there was a lot of physical elements that lead me to believe that in some cases, in many cases, people are physically taken. But I've also dealt with metaphysical cases where the person themselves believes that they haven't left their physical body. You know, they believe that their spirit or soul or whatever has come out of their body, and it's that has gone and met with the beings.
That's like astral projection.
Astral projection, yeah. I've dealt with some cases where people have had out-of-body experiences and have actually witnessed a visitation go on in their room and seen greys in their bedroom floating from up near the ceiling, looking down and seeing themselves in bed, so they've been out of their body but having a visitation experience at the same time. As I say, lots of complex crossovers with aspects of the phenomena that we're still trying to uncover.
Maybe explains then if they've been consciously abducted,
yes,
as opposed to, so whatever it is has gone out of their body, they've carried on being able to drive the car.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to say that. Yeah, the driving cases. Yeah, because if these things, if they're taking people from their cars, let's say they're driving along a motorway and all of a sudden they get taken. Yeah, car would crash off the road, wouldn't it? Yeah, unless the bees take control of the vehicle and bring it to a stop or whatever safely. A lot of the time, what the person will find out is they come back round and they're further on down the road. They're still driving, but they're a bit further on down the road, so they kind of move position. But they're still there and they're still driving along, and in the meantime they've had that experience. Now you could say it's all going on in their mind, but I would say that that would be very narrow-minded to reach that viewpoint without looking at all the evidence across all the cases on record. But yeah, it's a fascinating element of it. I didn't really discuss that because it's sort of separate to missing time, but you could say in some ways it has links with it. Anybody else? No? Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry.
Can I just make a quick announcement?
Yes. Oh, there we go.
Mike's just told me that there's a white mobile home outside, blocking somebody in. If it belongs to anybody in here, please don't move it, please.
I get that.
White mobile home, nobody?
She could be out.
What shape is it? Is it this shape with the dome on the top?
The funny looking guy up there asking questions.
Yes, sorry.
You know the family, the military family said they saw the orb coming into
Yeah, the alarm case, yeah.
That really reminded me, you know where this London talks about orbs, physically
Yes.
as well, and he's got a military link.
Yep.
That's really interesting. I'm wondering, is there some kind of military experiment going on with these military people?
It's entirely possible, yeah, that it has some kind of military element to it. But there's a lot of contact cases on record that are non-military where people have seen orbs around their home. Time and time again, that's really, really common. So you would say, you might associate that as being linked with ghosts, yeah? You're like, okay, that's nothing to do with aliens or contact or anything. If that's the case, how come so many contactees also have orb experiences in their home? Are those orbs some kind of somebody checking up on them, monitoring them, and it's or is it a spirit and they're drawing it in because it's kind of unlocked sixth sensibilities for them? Or maybe they've had those sixth sensibilities. So you can go down the rabbit hole with this. Maybe they've had those abilities since birth, yeah? And that's why the beings are interested in them, because they're psychic, because they've got psychic abilities. And so they're seeing ghosts, and then they start having contact experiences. There's all sorts of different possibilities for this, and you've got to kind of look into it and before making your conclusions as to what's exactly going on. And everybody has a right to believe different things, yeah? Where if everybody believed the same thing with this subject, the world would be a pretty boring place, right? It's that fascination, that drive for answers. That's what keeps me going as an investigator. Not an experiencer, at least to my knowledge, right? This has been blocked out. Yeah. Is that about wrapping up? Talk another one? Yes, John. That's all right. Yeah.
People that are basically not remembering things happen.
Yes.
A lot of these kids, I was one of these kids, And I've always been thinking it's to do with future influence, and that's the reason why it brought out at that point. It's for you to do something later in life.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the people with nice triangles are now coming forward and they're enhancing the knowledge of the topic, etc. for other people.
Entirely possible. Yeah.
I'm massively influenced to do things now myself. I've got to do things.
Yeah.
I have a choice. You know, I'm 16 hours a day doing this.
Yes.
You know, you're got to get
driving
out
force.
and do something. It's just like, I wonder whether it's like a time difference, and that's the reason why.
Yes. Yeah.
Out from memory.
Well, a lot of people, like with these experiences, they do feel like they've been visited for a particular reason. You know, like there's something coming sort of big on the horizon or whatever, but they don't really know what that is. And they have an inkling that something's going to happen, but you know what that something is a mystery. And then some people have more sort of detailed recollections of that, where they claim certain things. But a lot of the time in the past, people have claimed certain dates or certain years where things were going to take place, and then nothing seemingly happened, unless it's like subconscious or something, and something we can't detect day to day. It's hard to say for sure. But it is interesting the way that these people visit seemingly random individuals. Like, for example, the case in Zimbabwe, which I'm sure you've heard of, the aerial school landing where about 60 school children all saw a landing craft, and some grey beings approached them and had telepathic communication with a few of them. It was warning them, the telepathic messages they got, and if you're unfamiliar with this case, it was warning them that technology is bad and that we're going to destroy the planet or something, kind of like an environmental warning. It's giving it to these random kids in Zimbabwe, right? It's like, why? Yeah. It's almost like, surely if you wanted to make a change to how the human race deal with the environment, you would go and visit the heads of industry or the heads of government and influence them and speak with them and get them to change their minds on what they were doing to the environment. But instead, they land in Zimbabwe in the middle of the daytime at this school and speak to these school children and pass these messages. For what purpose? Really interesting. But maybe it's trying to humanise something that's not human again. Maybe they don't realise that who they're talking to.
Those children are now, as adults, speaking about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So it wasn't just back then. I mean, now it's changed their lives.
It has, yeah. And they're writing very pages. Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, just briefly, you just reminded me of something, like missing memory there. A few weeks ago, my missus got a shop in High Street Arcade in town. She sells crystals and beads. You might want to go there, incidentally, because there's a lot of alien heads, they're really cool. Anyway, she said the other day, I had a lady in the shop today who commented about the alien heads, all very nice in there, and the woman said, yeah, I used to live in Zimbabwe and I had an experience in school I went to. And she told me this, and I went, what? Was it called Ariel? And she said, oh, I didn't ask her the name of the school, but I'm waiting for her to go back in though so that she can take her details. And she lives in Swansea, will you believe it?
I see it all spread out across the globe, you know, there's kids who saw this thing. And there's a brilliant documentary, The Aerial Phenomenon, it's called. It only came out just the other year, and it's very, very compelling. And then you'll see some of the children now full adults, and they're drawing paintings about the experience. It's like genuinely changed their lives. And they're not sort of saying, oh, it was a school prank, we all got together and made it up. They're saying, no, it happened. It's really fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I could go off on a tangent and start talking about Ariel for hours, so I'm not going to. Let's wrap things up, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed tonight.